We are live.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone. Under the auspices of the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation, I have the great honor and pleasure to welcome Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, Shaykh Sadi Shakur, and Dr. Adnan Al-Adnani to the live premiere on the launch of the Universal Qur'an, a translation of selected verses of the Quran by Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri. This book is now available online as well. Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, as we all know, is an enlightened Sufi master, a spiritual mystic and visionary whose life and works serve us as a reminder that spirituality is a science as well as an art and relevant to our times. He grew up in an environment where religious scholars and Sufis were part of his formative experiences. His love and understanding of the universality of the Quranic message has imbued him with respect for the religions, for their spiritual paths, and the ability to discern the common elements of our collective journey towards awakening to the one and only reality. Joining us from Scotland is the renowned Sufi scholar Shaykh Sadi Shakur, who also holds a PhD in religious studies and an MA in somatic psychology. Sadi is the past chair of the mysticism of the American Academy of Religion, current director of the Edinburgh Institute for Advanced Learning, and has followed the Sufi path for more than 40 years. He also serves on the advisory board of the International Association of Sufism and has authored and edited over a dozen books, including several with Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri. Joining us from France is Dr. Adnan Al-Adnani, an scientist, author, and scholar who has authored The Lights of Consciousness, which is a Sufi view of science and spirituality. He regularly collaborates with Shaykh Fadhlalla on various projects and programs organized by the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation. He also has a PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Strathclyde in UK. Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, Shaykh Sadi Shakur, and Dr. Adnan, welcome and thank you. Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, I will thank you very much for joining us. And my first question to set the context of the subsequent dialogue with Shaykh Sadi Shakur and Dr. Adnan is, what were your motivations to write this latest translation of selected verses of the Universal Qur'an?
The same as every other motivation I have, to reduce my suffering, to increase my certainty of the perfection of the future, and to experience the utter perfection of the moment. Same, they just been over years, and it moves from certain focus to another focus, and ultimately it is to know, who are you, what is it all about, why do you like this, why do you like that, why can't you be stable in your inner, who are you, who is the inner, who is the outer, where is God, why is there so much more and more suffering, why is there fear of death, and on and on. The usual, if you like, baggage and package that everybody has. And the Quran was very, very helpful to me in that it doesn't focus on a person. It is not a cult. It gives patterns and designs of how things are and how things emanate and return. So it really taught me that the center is everywhere and nowhere. Space and time are necessary illusions for the human confusion to reach its conclusion. So that's really what it was. And I thought maybe if putting it down, discussing it, sharing it, may help others. It has to be done by every individual. Nobody can save anybody from their own misery and stupidities. They can act as a friendly mirror, if at all. But you have to do it. You have to undo what you stupidly, in a distracted moment, you have done. That's all. So that was the motive. And I enjoyed doing it, and the beneficiary was myself. And if anybody else benefits, good luck to them. Thank the eternal generosity of the source of all creation. And that's all. I have no expectations. for changing the world, changing you, changing anybody's. These changes are all superficial anyway. The truth never changes. Your own spirit or soul is divine, and it is cosmic, and it is not subject to space and time, and yet it is caught into your little mobile septic tank, the so-called you, being born and you die. So it's a tragedy on the face of it, but in reality, it's a comedy. So you have to laugh at it and hang on to that light that is neither suffers nor expresses pleasure. It's perfect, eternal. That is all.
Thank you, Sheikh Fadhlalla. Gentlemen, Sheikh Saadi, Dr. Adnan, turning to you. Start with, what are your views on universal Quran? Sheikh Saadi?
Allah.
Thank you, Haider. Assalamu alaikum, bismillah. Universal Quran selects, as the name implies, the most universal verses from the Quran itself. And these are primarily from the Meccan surahs. That is mostly the early surahs in which Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving, you could say, the initial message that was received. Looking at this in terms of the world traditions or the world scriptures, we see a number of parallels, or I see a number of parallels here. For instance, Jesus, Prophet Isa, he gives a message in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Sermon on the Plain, in the Beatitudes, which is a very simple universal message, which is applicable to all times. However, the trajectory of his prophethood does not include later giving wisdom for, you could say, an organized, specific community. Prophet Isa only has Mecca. He doesn't have Medina, so to speak. Whereas Prophet Muhammad extends into both types of wisdom. Now, this is a controversial area in that some people consider it, how would we say, sacrilegious to distinguish the universal from the particular. But I would say that all wisdom is wisdom. It's revealed from the source of reality, from the ruh, and it just depends on whether the person is being confronted with everyday circumstances, in other words, what is right in front of him or her, which would be Medina, or whether the person is looking through, you could say, the so-called everyday circumstances, through the conditions of humanity, of nature, of culture, of the planet, to something deeper. And this is the, you could say, although more universal, more universally applied, it's all wisdom. It's all from the same source. So it doesn't mean that one is divine and the other is not divine, or this or that. These are useless arguments. So we find this in many, many world traditions. It's just that in Islam, it's not as well recognized by the general public. Many people read the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, from one of the Hindu traditions, but they read it for the universal wisdom. They don't read it necessarily as part of a long, you could say, family drama or family war between two clans that goes on over generations. So this is more the sense in which this is more of what's needed in the world today, is that, as Shaykh Fadhlalla often says, that we seek to find that direct connection with Source, with reality, with Allah, whatever that reality is called, which starts with our own individual heart and our own individual ruh. So I very much welcome the release of this book, and it presages a much longer work that Shaykh Fadhlalla, Dr. Adnan, and I have been working on with Leah Kala, which is a Sufi apparatus for investigating the Quran. But this is you could say, one of the first fruits of some of that work, as well as, of course, of Shaykh Fadhlalla's many, many years of depth and insight into the Quran, and his many commentaries that he's given online and in his other books. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Haider.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Saadi. That is really profound, and I liked when you said that this is really emanates from the same source. Dr. Adnan, your views.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Haidar. Thank you, everybody. Yes, for my interest, really, of course, the Quran is the primary source for Muslims, and it doesn't, from that kind of living experience, there's no separation between the universal and the particular. It's all seamlessly connected. But in our modern times, especially in the past 100 years, where especially in the new translations, the ones that I know of in English, there are probably maybe 100 of them or so, that wasn't so clear. If you see that there is the universal message is not clear, the modern mind is very focused on specifics and details, and especially with the scientific mind. So it's a lot of analysis there and stuff, but then the universality, the timelessness is often veiled, let's to say. So especially, I mean, from my own background, looking for a cosmology. So the modern minds, there's so many now theories of everything, so-called theories of everything, from whether it's physics or psychology or maybe others. But what about the theory of everything from the Quran? Who's talking about that? That's been my interest working with Shaykh, is bringing science and spirituality and seeing, well, where is that and what is missing? And certainly for me, this book is a kind of an introduction to a theory of everything, a Quranic theory of everything. So that it really addresses the modern mind, which is not literal. It wants to see a vision of what's for divinity and humanity and how they are seamlessly connected. And certainly this is really an ideal introduction, especially for example, non-Muslims who are coming to study and looking at the right approach instead of getting lost in all this kind of diverse maybe translations or approaches. So this is really a timely need for such a book.
Mashallah, the theory of everything. Gentlemen, I will now ask you to engage in a direct dialogue with Sheikh Fadhlalla on the specifics of the contents of the book. Sheikh Saadi, Dr. Adnan, please feel free to enter into the dialogue with Sheikh now.
Well, Sheikh Fadhlalla, what do you see as you could say, the main message that the Quran is giving to people today? We have language, of course, that is from 1300 or 1400 years ago. So what do you see as being most relevant for young Muslims and also people of any tradition as they perhaps dip into the Quran for the first time?
The ultimate challenge and mystery is that through the senses, whatever we look at, we hear, we touch, we smell, we taste, has got in it duality. High and low, bitter and sweet, and acceptable and rejectable. Two, birth and death, fear and hope, and all of the other things. So this is the nature of the reality to which all of us have been subjected. And we try through experience, wisdom, insight, watchfulness, discovery, come to see how these dualities are in essence emanating from one, returning to one. And that is the ultimate solution to my fears, anxieties, insecurities, all of the other things that everybody suffers from, more and more and more as we are now. We have tried to bring in a certain measure of security in the outer, but the inner is more and more bereft. We need to balance the outer and the inner and the temporariness of our life on earth with permanency and continuation of life itself. That is what the nature of the soul or the ruh is, as the Quran reminds us. So the real me is a divine light, or bundle of lights, or a package of lights that gives me the experience of life and reflection upon life and so on. And that is not subject to space and time. It's been caught for a while in this zone of space and time. So the real me is that eternal light journeying within all the diversities and changes in this short life until the body and the mind are separated from the soul, and we call that death. For ordinary people, it is a sad event. For those who really have got glimpse of the truth of it, it is a celebratory event. And now there is a release of that entity, the soul, which is cosmic, back is released to its own infinite, boundless zone. So that is really how it is. And I think the same thing is reflected with other major unveilings. It is a bit more, if you like, steeped in traditions and in culture and so on because of the Abrahamic traditions and so on. But this is the whole story. Once you accept the basics of it, you begin to look at different sketches of it, as this book tries to present. Then you find the whole thing is so connected until you see only oneness and one center and one instant. You are a cosmic entity, not definable, not subject to changes in space and time, and everything else is shown to it. In other words, the good and the bad and the acceptable. And in order for you to realize that the real you is beyond all of this, but can touch all of this and make some sense out of it within the zone of our earthly consciousness. That's all. Very simple. And it is a relief to be able to connect with the changing world, knowing at all times that the essence, ever constant, ever permanent, eternal. That's it.
Dr. Adnan.
Yeah, no. Well, for me, that's fascinating. Is the your choice of using renderings, as you say it. It's a way of a much needed shifting consciousness, because we're become so much literal. And from my perspective, a lot of the studies before, they try to say whether it's the how is there alignment between the inner and the outer, but most cases I find the alignment is not between misalignment is not, it's between the outer and the outer. Because of the change of, as you say many times, from the time of the revelations, the language itself changes and the meaning has changed. So we end up kind of getting confused. So there's a much needed kind of shifting consciousness in order you approach it from almost a different consciousness. So I think fascinated that you chose renderings, Sheikhna. So
Sheikhna, about the this comment of the renderings, would you dwell on that a little more, please?
It's part of the growth of individuals. It's part of evolution. It's part of the mind evolving, developing, and then exhausting itself and leaving itself aside. Moving from mind to heart. Moving from self to soul. Moving from the visible, biographical, to that light, which is the most mysterious, magnificent miracle of all. So that is all of it is rendering. Everything we do is a touch of something or another. But it's not the thing itself, because there is no thing as such. Whatever solid you have is a temporary state of energy harnessed in that form of a rock or in whatever. It's all of it emanated from that cosmic, boundless energy and returns back to that after our little, universe has come to an end. We are halfway through. So we have to accept the fact that we are subject to outer experiences. It's hard, it's soft, it is painful, it is pleasurable, and on and on. All of them are transitory. And what you and I and everyone truly seeking the assurance of that which is permanent. And that is the nature of the soul within the heart. So everything we touch, look, analyze, talk about is a certain rendering. All of it is illusory at the end. The whole thing is fraudulent. We're all fraud. We all pretend to be something very reliable. Who's reliable? You're going to die. That's not reliable. You change your mind. That's not reliable. What? It's all fantasy. And we make a thing out of it, and we create a national anthem, and we raise a flag, and we kill each other. And they call themselves very rational and very, very modern and very, decent people. What do you mean people? It's trouble. Two is a trouble. Otherness is trouble. In truth, there is no otherness. We're all the same. The Qur'an, from different angles, tells us that all souls, all human souls are the same. So are all animal souls. All of the souls are the same and have been exposed to the infinite of their nature, infinitude of their nature. Alastu bi rabbikum qalu bala. They confessed, yes. There is that cosmic lordship or magnificent, if you like, creative origin and perfect governance. So you have been exposed to perfection. We're aiming for perfection in our little endeavors and our little, we try to work excellently with output. All of them are trials. This is our little kindergarten. So as this amazing opportunity of empowerment that human beings are given, which can cause havoc, it's also going to be used by those who are wise and awakened with permission. Who's given you permission to do this or not to do this? Who's given you permission to give A and not to B? And why so much and so little? And that is why we have regrets, sorrow, and all of the other, if you like, negative emotions, which paralyzes most people. And then comes guilt, and then comes regrets, and then comes remorse, and on and on. Why? Because you were not calibrating at that moment. You were not taking permission and reference. Until 50, 70, 80 years ago, people had to take permission to do whatever they were doing. But with the opening up of the world and a huge explosion of population and so-called work opportunities, you don't now need, on the face of it, you don't need to take permission from anyone. So we end up chaotic, causing more chaos. That's it. But permission meaning that you want to do the right thing at the right time in the right way, so you don't have regrets. You don't have guilt. You have not caused more suffering than already what it is. That's all. That if you don't save yourself, you cannot help anybody else in any way. Save yourself from the lower self. Save your entire entity, which is earthly and heavenly, from the fantasies of personality and profile and status, and all of it motivated by fears, anxieties, and all of the other things we love for power. It's the most powerful in you is your own soul. So what are you looking for? What power? It's the source of life. There can't be anything more reverential than that. We all are, each one of us, obsessed with life. So what about your life? What about the source of your own life? Do you give reverence to it? That is your residing Lord. Ask for permission. No, I am free. Free of what? You're full of mucus, full of this. You're born to die. Free of what? No. You can be free from the illusion of seeking freedom. Yes. That's the beginning of wisdom. Until such time you find even wisdom is of no point. You're just living the moment. The moment is immense. The moment is eternal. And if your mind and heart are together, then you are present. And you don't have to go back and forth in time. That's it. Then this is, in a way, can this be described as being at the edge of timelessness in this world whilst experiencing space and time. You're calibrating with the eternal reality in you, your own soul, whilst enjoying the changes in seasons and time, and reliable and unreliable. Is wonderful. And talk or silence is wonderful. It is the world of duality, emanating from unity, returning back to unity. And you are the witnesser of it all. And give her the good news that all of this is in preparation for you to now enter that zone of infinitude, not hampered by your body and your mind. That's it.
Sheikhna, you've so beautifully captured really what is the essence of the entire universal Quran. I mean, you've divided into 6 parts about life eternal appearing in cycles. Part 2 is 2 zones of consciousness, and then creation and earthly experiences, humanity and conditioned consciousness, wholesome living, and the web of cosmic oneness. I would refer to Sheikh Saadi, Dr. Adnan, with reference to what Sheikh Fadhlalla just said, and the 6 parts of the Holy Quran. And please dwell something on this with Sheikhna.
Bismillah. Well, as Sheikhna said, be hundreds of years ago, and then extending for thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, human beings were living with a very different sort of consciousness. That on the outer level, we were very much limited by lack of food. When we were nomads, hunter-gatherers, say, one could not rely necessarily on one's next meal. One had to follow in the way of the best of our ancestors. And so there was this natural sense of, so to speak, outer limitation in human consciousness. We acknowledged that there are limits to growth, there are limits to what we can do. And it wasn't just that the tribe said, well, you can't do it, but it was obvious that, at least pre-agriculture, we couldn't rely on where our next meal was coming from. And so if that was true, then we couldn't necessarily rely on our next breath or where our next drink of water was going to come from. So as human consciousness changes over thousands of years, we seem to become more and more individualized in that sense. And we can see this in the trajectory of the way very many early words in all languages refer to both an inner and an outer reality. For instance, we have ruh in Arabic, or ruha in Aramaic. Similarly, in Hebrew, that means both breath, my breathing, and you could say spirit or soul. So the inner-outer was much more connected in those days when we realized our outer limitation. Now, very slowly, over longer periods of time, it's as though our inner and our outer, in terms of human consciousness, begin to draw apart. And so then we end up with, at this point, all of the ologies, psychology, sociology, philosophy, all of these different ways of saying, well, this is inner, and that's really the outer. And as one of the English poets once put it, we end up with what's called the tyranny of the I, so that people think the I, that is the I. So we think that the only thing that exists is material reality, because that's what we've been inoculated to believe by a certain development in Western science. And so then this illusion, as Shaykh now talks about, that the human self, the nafs, or as Jesus calls it, the nafsha, is the only reality, and only the outerness of it matters, leads to this, you could say, mistaken idea of personal human freedom, whereas the freedom is really of the soul, of the self, you could say of the ruh. It's not of the self. So it's a confusion. We can't actually go back to being, well, we probably can't go back to being nomads or hunter-gatherers. We don't know, actually. But what we can do then is consciously pursue this inner connection. You could say the innerness that we have, the individualness that we have, we can use heart and will to re-infuse ourselves into the bigger universe, and to stop looking at what's out there and start asking the question, well, who's doing the looking? Who is actually doing the looking? Science now talks about, or you could say particle physics talks about, that an observer collapses the wave into a particle. So what we're seeing is, you could say, what is collapsed from the infinite, or from the quantum field, into a particular moment of seeing. But who is seeing the seer? Who is seeing us? I mean, we can't stop at the human. Who sees the bird or the animal or me? Who is sensing? Well, it's the same ruh. And this is what the Qur'an and all the scriptures emphasize. The Qur'an, I think, in some ways more simply than other scriptures, because it's always applied in both. We can see that you could say that the tincture of the infinite is always even within the specific decision that the Qur'an is talking about. And so reaching then through the language itself, we discover the actual meaning of our purpose, of our life. The 6 subjects that you mentioned, Haidar, that the book is divided into, are really, as Shaykh said very well, it's really, you don't need much more than that, really. I don't think we need much more. We could even do it slightly less, but the Quran is very generous, Ya Kareem, Al Kareem. So it gives us all these wonderful different ways of looking, or of allowing, you could say, is know that even if you don't see Allah, Allah sees you. But you could say Allah is always seeing through us, even when we're unconscious of it, which would be... Anyway, I'll stop there.
No, thank you very much. Dr. Adnan, with reference to the sick, I'd like you to engage in a dialogue with Shaykh Fadhlalla on this, please.
Yes, I mean, looking again at, in a sense, in a historic perspective, it represents a microcosm. So really what is known as the Meccan period, which is the essential. Imagine it's the first 10 years of that. There is simply the focus on effectively breaking with for me, fulfillment of the Adamic project. So it started, of course, all the prophetic previously can gradually bringing into that. But then here comes, during this, 10 years is nothing if you look at it. But there's only one message there. Effectively, almost humanity, especially with that harsh environment where people, not expected to live long, and nobody can live on its own. Everybody has to have allegiance and protection and all that. And here comes this message where it says, leave all that, forget all that. You are now something else. There is now, as the book says, starts with now, it doesn't say where, you have to struggle for survival and, you need so many camels. It says life eternal. I mean, that's such a big shock, Sheikhna. Such a big shock to say. I mean, that's why they started, they're scratching their heads. What does it mean? We will die. Look at our bones. You say that, life is, what does that mean? When it says he made the gods one god. Shay'un ajib. It's completely unfathomable thing. And also during that first period, it is what's not maybe known so much is the essential engagement with Ahl al-Kitab. A lot of that first, short ayahs really was an answers to questions from people who had a sense of the sacred. So describe us your Lord, describe us, tell us what, and the answers were there.
Thank
so
you.
that the core message is that, as I said, that's really all we need. But then, of course, time has its effect. So.
MashaAllah. Sheikhna, in the first part, as Dr. Adnan said, this is life eternal, but it's appearing in cycles, as you say in the book. And you divide this portion to three parts. You talk about the unique cosmic light, then you talk about dualities and pluralities expressing unity, and then the connectedness and the continuity, I guess, infinite. Two questions, Sheikhna. Why did you choose to divide this into these 6 parts, and why did you start with the life eternal and appearing in cycles?
It's all for your sake to ask the question. I anticipated all of this. Otherwise, I won't have a dialogue with you.
Allah.
We have nothing to say. Enter into the infinite, magnificent silence, and that's all what there is. But anyway, we are, as human beings, very much influenced by the movement in time. Change and time and space are not separable. So each one of us is influenced by the ticking of time. And the ultimate sacred, the ultimate obsession we have is with eternal life itself. And time reminds us that your life is coming to an end. You're a year older, 5 minutes more, and. So to drive one out of the cocoon of the fantasy, I am this and I am that, or the self, or the animal, or the biography, into the reality of you. And the reality of you is timeless. See, once that is discovered, as Dr. Adnan was saying, the entire ethos of the ever-fighting tribes changed. They were all after, the biggest industry was looting. It's changed because suddenly they discovered, no, you're here in order to be tuned to the eternal light in you. And that has no connection, in fact, with your outer wealth, outer power, outer whatever. It's insignificant. So the difference is immense. It's not a difference in time or scale. It is a different entity. It's a different zone. Once you have been touched by the eternal light in you, even if it is as out-of-body experience or near-death experience or whatever, no longer this outer, if you like, constant human drama will affect you. It's insignificant. They died, they lived. Who is they? Is the Ruh. The Ruh never dies, it's eternal. So your perspective changes. And suddenly they began to unify in a manner that was inconceivable. Even now it's inconceivable. لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. It says, if you spend all what there was, the wealth, to unify hearts, you can't. Allah does it. What do you mean? Arwah. If you realize the other person is really a ruh, it is not another. It is the same as you with a different cultural baggage, with an outer difference, different skin color, different this, different gender. But the reality of it is exactly the same. It is a package of energies, which you call lights, which in themselves produce all the possibilities for us to understand, relate to the infinite varieties of comings and goings. So once you have got that story, then no other story is of really much of an interest. They're all silly little blips in like bubbles on a vast ocean. They emerge, they grow, and they burst out. It doesn't mean you don't recognize it, because there's still the touch of the individuality and humanity. That's always there. But it becomes so insignificant, almost forget it. Oh, you say, yes, I forgot that, I was the father or whatever. It is an evolutionary process, starting with a child, me. It's all what the child knows. The nafs is developing, evolving, until such time you realize other people have the same thing, same nafs. Everybody wants the same, and nothing is enough, more and more. So you begin to realize what a futile fallacy we are living in. The whole world is that. Our world of economics, politics, all of it is like that. It's fantasy upon fantasy, which is now becoming a nightmare, big nightmare. Only 100 odd years ago, the population was less than 10th or whatever what it is now. Look at it now. What have we done? All fear for and desire for survival. So we increase the agriculture, so more population, more anxieties. Anxieties are everywhere now. Hardly anybody is spared the stress of anxiety. Because we have lost the basic model as to who am I, how can I live, not just survive, live well in this life, live in a fulfilled way, enjoy the changes of the season, and there is more and there is less, enjoy them. So we became exceptionally, if you like, animalistic and earthbound, whereas our essence is essentially heavenly, boundless. So we have to return back, or we get wiped out anyway, as we probably are. Either way, it doesn't matter. Our so-called universe is one of zillions of universes. It's not a big deal. This tiny little Earth, part of the solar system, part of the one galaxy of billions of stars out of billions of galaxies. Put it in perspective, and you'll be amazed that the mystery is that this soul or spirit, your center, everybody's soul is a center. So there are only centers. That's part of the meaning that wherever you turn, there is the face of Allah. There is the nur of Allah. It's the ultimate mystery. But unless you celebrate it, beyond just pleasure and joy, you celebrate it in a most incredible, transformative way, you cannot put up with all of the changes in the out. You start fighting because of the religion difference, because of culture, because of race, because of color. Never ends. And instead of differences being a cause of celebration, this is the outer world, zillions of differences. But you're endowed by given different sketches and maps. So you have to know spontaneously know now, this is another issue. So let me look at that sketch. And you find it's there, it is there. But you were not there, that's all. And then you're truly content. If you die now, you're celebrating. If you die tomorrow, you're celebrating. You hope you won't make stupid mistakes between now and tomorrow. So that's it is fun.
Thank you very much, Shaykh. Shaykh, I'm going to refer to Sheikh Saadi and Dr. Adnan in the selection of the verses, because what Shaykh just expounded over the last 4 or 5 minutes really reflects his choice of verses that he's put in the 6 sections. And I'd like both of you to please dwell a bit on this with reference and a dialogue with Sheikhna on the verses that he selected to put into each section.
Well, one of the themes that comes across often in the selection of the verses is, you could say, the theme of opposites. Everything is known by its opposite. And for there to be an opposite, there has to be a source, you could say a oneness from which the two comes. Yeah. Many people today, they object to this sort of language. You have good and bad, ripe and unripe, affliction and ease, all of these things. They say, why do we have to deal with all of this? Let's just go to they call now non-duality. But even to speak about non-duality involves duality, because who's speaking, as I mentioned before? So the Quran, as well as the other Abrahamic scriptures, acknowledge that we live as though in the two worlds. We're, as the Quran puts it very well, middle people. And so this constant addressing of, on the one hand, on the other, on this and that, if you have this, if you have that. You know, if you have this now, you're going to have that later. This is, I'm not sure, you know, frankly, this is a difficult message to get across, as Shaykh Fadhlalla and Dr. Adnan were saying, because people only want to have pleasure. They only want to have the best. They only want to, so we're in the onlyism. And so we have this social media that's constantly feeding us what it thinks we want based on what we have wanted. And this, again, leads to a great deal of forgetfulness, to use the polite term. The nisya, then as Aramaic, the nisyuna part of the human being, the forgetful part of the human being, becomes more and more emphasized, and the remembering part is going to have its moment, its wacht. Otherwise, we're in big trouble, from what I could see. You know, again. Maybe that is just the way it's going to be. But again, I would hope that books like the Universal Quran can be heard in this regard of calling us back to a different sense of ripeness, which is really what's behind most of the Abrahamic Semitic words for goodness, is about being in the moment, being in the now. And this is then the antidote for being caught, you could say, in this seesaw of life. Okay, there's this, there's that, there's that, how wonderful, how terrible. Well, you know, can we find this middle way out of some of the problems that we see around us in the world today? Climate change, all these other things, ecological devastation, the splitting up of communities within communities, and more splitting, as Shaykh mentioned. So there has to be some reorientation. Maybe that's going to happen through sacred scriptures, or that's going to be part of the solution, because we have all this diversity. I think it has to become partially this way, and then partially through science, which is where I would pass it over to Dr. Adnan, and maybe he can engage on some of this with Shaykhna too.
It is said that every time you read the Quran, and if you don't, if you don't get a new meaning out of it, you haven't read the Quran. So it refers to the Quran when saying, you know, Allah's words are never ending, yet what we have as a text, maybe finite numbers of words. But here, I think what I want to get at is in Shaykhna's teachings, and he brings out these really almost, it's not contemporary, but this new language that addresses at least the contemporary mind, because simply you cannot go back a book from 1,000 years ago, no matter how sublime it is. It's really a huge bridge to kind of connect. But Shaykhna does that using you know, the same eternal message. I mean, the messages never change. I mean, لن تجد لسنة الله تبديلا. You know, Allah's message is eternal. It's the same, never changing. But we have to recognize what changes is me. I'm the relative. I mean, my mind is not the same as my grandparents' mind. So how do you connect to that? Okay, now today is the language of science. So when Shaykhna speaks about two zones of consciousness, I mean, you don't see that but then that bridges, once it's understood, is big. So my consciousness is a relative. It's something that is conditioned, and it is shifting. So it is the observer so the observer is so the light is one, but the observer, me, is changing. So how do you address this observer that is changing? So unless I understand myself as this zone of consciousness that is subject to duality, yet there is ultimately no duality. So how do you do that? Again, you need really a different treatment. Sheikhna, how do you do that?
Science is a big help, as you and Sheikh Saadi have repeatedly helped everyone in that, and me, in that there is the zone of the quantum infinite boundless field. You can't even talk. It is one. It is beyond even that, whatever it is. It is not subject to space and time. In order to yearn for it, know it, be prepared for that Jannah, to return back to Jannah through being qualified, we are put into the zone of space and time that nothing will be enough. And this is where this magnificent word Akbar comes in. Nothing will be enough for me, for anyone intelligent person. More, not enough. This galaxy is not enough, more, not enough. Until such time you know that we are living in a zone of finite space and time. And the reason I am not content and satisfied, because my soul is transmitting lights and energies that are boundless. So I have to reconcile the two. As a human, it's enough. You've eaten, you have rested, enough. Now be useful. Otherwise, you will start being distracted, and distraction will lead to destruction. So you then are qualified to really, truly imbibe and be in the state of the absolute reality of timelessness. We have to qualify for it. We're here in a kindergarten. Adam didn't know he was in paradise. So the dark side of paradise, the whispering of the shaitan, whatever, said, look, what about eternity? What about khuld? What about... So he had not experienced khuld because he was in khuld. He had not experienced timelessness because he was in it. So he said, no. قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِبَعْضٍ. Half of you. And then the Quran incredibly revealing the inner essence. It says, we have only created pairs of everything. Everything. So there is two of me. There is that which is in the quantum field, which is my soul, and there is that which is subject to space and time, birth and death, good and bad, accepted and rejected, the so-called me. I have to reconcile the two. Until I'm reconciled the two, I am split, and I will only cause more distraction and havoc, as everybody does. And look at our politics globally. Look at our international relationship. Look at that. Look at the illusions we've had. This war will end up all wars. It's ludicrous. Really, it's myth upon myth upon. So my job is to reconcile the human side of me, ever-changing, uncertain, insecure, wonderful, with the eternal light that is activating that side, the outer side, for a while. That's it. And that will liberate me from the illusion that I will die. It's not I. They were not together, my body, mind, and soul. They became together. Now they have to split again. It's a celebration. It's an entirely different outlook to beginnings and ends and all of that. We have reduced it to this fantasy thing that no, human beings are now civilized, they are developed, and we have numbers, we have measurements, it is more developed, more civilized. What is it all about? Not one single person you come across who is consistently content. And yet, we have far more things and wealth than ever. Our lifespan is nearly doubled in 100 years. So it's in order to increase the misery. People in their 30s, they will pass away and die and so on. And now they're until 80, 90, they're hobbling and so on. Yeah, alhamdulillah. What are you talking about? Where is your contentment? Where is it? Who is it going to be content? It's your ruh. If you are the ruh, then ruhun wa rayhan. Then there's no issue anymore.
Shaykh, thank you so much. We're at the tail end now in the last 5 minutes. So brief comments from Sheikh Saadi and Dr. Adnan, and then we'll have Sheikhna round this up, please. Thank you.
Allah.
Well, I would only encourage folks to, especially if you have not had any exposure to the Quran, to use this universal Quran. It's a slight book. There's not a huge book, and start to dive into some of these short sayings and ayahs, the ayat that Shaykh has selected, because as I mentioned before, it's all there, and even though it is language from more than 1,000 years ago, with Shaykh's commentary, you can begin to see, or I can see, the issues in my own life sort of highlighted, and begun to put into some more clarity, really, and that's going to be benefiting everyone, I think. So thank you, Shaykh, for doing the book, and thanks, Haider, for gathering us for this.
Thank you, Sheikh Saadi. Dr. Adnan, sir.
Well, the Quran says, whoever turns away from this deen, which is the life, the source of life, the celebration of life, no big deal. Allah will bring people whom He loves, يحبهم ويحبونه. So it is just pointing out to the central idea of simply bringing people in love. Such a huge message that really it's been veiled because of what Shaykh says, all the noise, all the running around and stuff. Ultimately, if anything that brings us together, inshallah, brings humanity, it's a message, it's a universal message for humanity, that to bring people in together in love, which is, of course, energized by the eternal love. He loves them before they love him. How can we understand the idea of love? We are struggling most of the time by our many minds. Yet that immense love, really, that is bringing us all together. And really, any book, any message that contributes to that is really what we need. MashaAllah.
Thank you, Doctor. Sheikhna, I ask you for your kind last comments before we
Bismillah. وَبِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the graces of your Lord upon you, express them. One of which is here we are together with people whom we love each other, trust each other, we are humble with each other and honored by that humbleness. Also in this work, which is being, as a result of love and understanding and benefit of the Quran. And some 5-6 years ago, it was very clear that there are these 700, 800, 900 ayahs which are eternal, which are not, they are, as Shaykh Saadi also reminded us, they are mostly Meccan ayahs and so on. They are universal and they have been echoed in the past and so on. So then I had the wonderful, joy of having few people like Hashim, Ismail and Muhammad Bulbulia and Leia and of course all of the others who have been involved. But then it was clear that there is this selection. And then also I like people with me who are that intelligence to dive into it. And especially Hashim and Muhammad Bulbulia, I kept them at it for nearly over 2 years. So every time they come back with a slightly improved version, not good enough. So they grew accustomed to my being not good. So this was, for me, it was an enjoyable process. It was in every way graced. So I'm very happy that you people are also saying that it will be helpful to people. Take from it what you can and what you can digest at the time. It's not quantity, it's quality. And then you find that the rahmah was upon you. Even if you didn't understand it, there was a rahmah in that. And if you understand it, there is a double rahmah. So be honest, and have the courage of saying it, admitting it, and you find that your ruh is truly, utterly a gift beyond measure. That's it. Thank you, Baba. Thank you.
Very kind of you. And Dr. Adnan, thank you very much. Sheikhna, most illuminating. I've read through the first reading. It is an extremely simple book to understand. And like Shaykh Saadi said, it brings a contemporariness that is so wonderful, and I can relate it to, and I'm sure whoever has read it can relate it to what they are saying. And like you said, it's quality, not quantity. Thank you very much for joining us, Sheikh Nab, with your brilliant insights, your profound insights. Sheikh Saadi, Dr. Adnan, thank you very much. And this brings us to the end of this session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.